All right, this is Bootstrapped Web, episode 42. This is the podcast for you, the founder who learns by doing as you bootstrap your business online. And today, we're talking about webinars, how to use them to get customers. I'm Jordan.
And I'm Brian.
And let's do this. But before we do, let's get a little bit of an update. Brian, what's been going on over the past week since we last spoke?
Yeah, sure. So, something that kind of occurred to me this morning. I was sitting in Starbucks as I usually do a couple times a week, doing some work in the morning. Had the baby with me too. That's always fun. She's like screaming next to me while I'm like trying to write some stuff. Anyway, so I'm all about learning by doing, and really I'm all about learning by watching what other people are doing. And I've been doing that for years, and that's really how I learn new techniques and strategies. I'm not really so much a book guy, even though I like to read and whatnot. I like to just watch what people are actually doing. And starting today, I started to really take notes on really studying what people are doing, especially when it comes to marketing. So, for example, what I've been doing a lot of lately is just subscribing to people's email launch sequences. And first of all, I'm just interested in the content that they put out, but really what I'm doing is I'm watching how they do their email launch sequence. I'll subscribe to someone, and I'll let their sequence play out, however long it takes, usually like a week or two. And then at the end of that 2 weeks, or however long it is, I'll go back and look at all those emails in my Gmail inbox and just go one by one, like, okay, how did they write email number 1? How about email number 2, number 3? What was the subject line? What was the purpose of every email? And then how did they build up toward that offer? Or how are they trying to convert new subscribers into something else, whether it's a webinar or purchasing a course and whatnot. So I've always kind of had my eye on that, but today I actually started taking notes on it. For instance, I just started checking out what's the guy who does the product launch formula?
Jeff Walker.
Yes, Jeff Walker. So pretty well known dude in the marketing world there. And
right.
So
I've done the same thing with his launch sequence, and you just kind of do a search in Gmail for his email address, and then you can see the whole history.
Exactly. Yeah. So I kind of took notes. I even took screenshots of the emails, and I took notes all right, this one was 2 days later, and then 3 days later, and then this one was next day.
Right. The timing.
Yeah. So then I can kind of go back and say what was the strategy, and when I compare that to 2 or 3 other people who are doing pretty well out there, you start to see these patterns, and you think you kind of get it just by watching what other people are doing, but once you start really studying it and taking notes, that's how you really learn. I'm finding.
Yeah, and the other part of that is once you actually try to set it up for the first time, that's when all these things come up, like, oh, when should I notify people? What should I say in this notification email? Should I send a reminder? How many reminders should I send? What should I say in the reminder? And that's when signing up for these people's lists and saying to yourself, how do I do the reminder? How do I do the offer? How do I follow up? How do I build excitement? And to be able to look back at the way other people have done it doesn't mean you can just copy and paste and it's going to work the same for you, but it's a starting point.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see, what else is going on this week? So I just, 2 days ago, I published a new article on my blog called How to Delegate When You're Creative. And this one actually seemed to do pretty well with the audience, and it's been resonating and getting a lot more tweets than usual. I was actually surprised because when I clicked publish on that, I kind of thought it wasn't very focused and whatnot. But a lot of people have been responding to it, a lot of good comments. So I've been that's been pretty exciting.
It resonated with me, and
cool.
and I think as much it's as much about what you're writing about as the actual details of what you're saying, because just even the title, right? I don't consider myself like a creative. I think of myself as a business person, but holy shit, I'm losing my mind with delegation. I keep looking at my to-do list, and it gets bigger. It never shrinks, and I just in the back of my head, the voice is getting louder. Okay, it's time to delegate more. Not everything on this to-do list has to be done by me, and it's time to actually move forward on it. I've gotten to the frustration level, so I think that's why that article did well, because I think a lot of people in the same boat. You just can't make enough money, and you can't be as happy as you want
Yeah.
if you just do too much.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that title, right? Like what you just said, this kind of goes back. This is really a longer conversation for another day, but
Right.
I'll just say real quick. The title is How to Delegate When You're Creative. And so, I've been doing a lot of work getting to know who my audience is, and I know for a fact that a lot of them are creative professionals, right? Designers, coders, copywriters. There are a lot of those type of people. But then there are other types as well, business owners. Like, you don't really consider yourself a creative person. I had a couple of comments on that article. Like, one was from someone who's like a fitness coach. And she's saying how she needs to start delegating, and so just goes to show that if you know your audience, that's how it really resonates with your core readership, but you'll still reach the fringes of that audience, like people who are not quite exactly those people.
Mm-hmm.
That's the benefit of really writing and speaking to one particular person, because it'll still branch out to other people as well.
Right. You attract the right people, and the people who are or consider themselves creative see that and they say, "Oh, that's for me." And I just ignore the word creative, and I see the word delegate and say, "Oh, that's for me."
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's cool. And the other little tactic that I kind of discovered this week, I'm sure a lot of people have been doing this. I just kind of figured it out this week.
I saw what you did. I'm interested. All right, tell us what it is. So
it's a really simple thing. Anybody can do this. Like, it's like a quick win that you can do right now. It literally took me 5 minutes to do. You can pin a tweet to your Twitter profile, right? And basically what that does is any one of your tweets, there's a little option, like you click the ... on that tweet, and you just select pin to profile. And what that does is it puts it right at the top of your profile. When anybody views you on Twitter, right before they're about to follow you on Twitter, they have to look at like twitter.com/Jordan Gal, right?
Yeah, you always read the first tweet or two.
Yeah, you read the bio, and you read a couple of the recent tweets. This one will show up as the first tweet, and it'll always be there, like constant. And what I did there was so yesterday I created a tweet which promoted my free crash course for Productize. I used like a catchy headline, the same headline that's on the landing page for that. And I also attached an image to that tweet, so it's got like a nice banner image. It's
right,
big and bold, attracts attention. And I just pinned that to my profile, and I did that like 2 days ago, and I've had, I don't know, at least 10 times more opt-ins every day. I've had something like 30 opt-ins today, 30 opt-ins yesterday.
I think it's brilliant.
I mean, that also might have something to do with the article that I published this week, so I'm still not sure how many opt-ins are coming from this, but I know that a bunch are, and it'll be interesting to see how that sustains over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. I think it's brilliant because, okay, you can pin a tweet, but to go the next step and pin a tweet that leads to an opt-in for your email list, that I think is that's the smart piece of it. And I don't see Twitter as a real hardcore business tool, but I have been getting a lot of Twitter followers and just talking to people on Twitter since the different interviews I've been doing. So to be able to turn Twitter into a source of real email subscribers, I think that's great, and it helps you be less hesitant to use Twitter, right? Sometimes I just look at Twitter, I'm like, oh, I think I can do so much there, but that's just not where I need to pay attention. I need to go somewhere else.
Yeah, I've always been
Mix the two is nice.
I've always been pretty into Twitter. Like for all of the social networks, that's always the one that I've used the most, and I always promote, like whenever I do guest articles and whatnot, I always try to include my Twitter handle there, and I don't really care so much about Google Plus. I almost never use Facebook.
Yeah.
LinkedIn, it's still I don't really look at it too much, but Twitter is where I feel like, especially in my industry, being in like the web industry, all the designers and all the Apple fanboys were all on Twitter, so I got
right. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it shows you have a bunch of followers. I've made that mistake where I just like followed a bunch in the beginning, so now I have more Twitter followers than, I'm following more people than follow me, and I think that's like a cardinal sin. If you see that on someone's profile, you're like, not worth following.
Yeah, the following ratio.
Right. Right. I need to go through and expunge and make
Yeah,
myself look better in the Twitter world. All right, cool, man. So that's
yeah,
interesting update, I
yeah. That's
guess.
about it. What's up
So,
on your side?
well, besides being really tired because my kids have stopped sleeping and uh, I appear to travel more than is healthy. Last week I went to a wedding up in the Cascade Mountains in Leavenworth. Right, this is like 2.5 hours east of Seattle. So it was a bit of a hike. So we went to Seattle first. It was a great time, beautiful wedding and beautiful mountain scenery. It was nice to get away, and I did manage to unplug enough. So our Wi-Fi didn't work, and I saw that. That's my excuse. That is going to make me okay with not worrying about anything. So I just took one morning, sent a bunch of emails, and then closed everything down. And was like, all right, I'll get back to everything on Monday. And the truth is, everyone's busy. Everyone's doing their thing. No one really minds. So on Monday, I sent a bunch of emails and say, sorry for the delay. I was at a wedding, and everyone's reply is like, hope you had a good time at the wedding. Like there's no one cares.
Yeah, especially on a Monday. I mean, I wouldn't even apologize. That I try to. A lot of times I'll never even respond on the weekend just to not set the expectation that I
Right.
respond
Right.
on weekends.
Yeah, I go back and forth on that. Sometimes I'm like, let me be the guy who responds at 11 o'clock at night, and sometimes, I think like you just said that you shouldn't set that precedent and expectations. Yes. So, right, what that leads into is I've really been enjoying the just the narrowed focus. So, right, we spoke a few weeks ago. I took a bunch of things off my table, and now I'm really focused on Carthook more than anything else, and it feels good, and it's starting to pay off. So the Mixergy interview kind of kicked off a bunch of momentum, and now I'm really just working my butt off to take advantage of all these opportunities that are coming up. So, every free trial, I'm like hunting them down, getting them on the phone, talking to them, getting them integrated. Everyone who contacts me and wants to do a partnership, I'm following up on. Other people who are replying and saying, I want to work with you. This is the e-commerce platform I'm using. I'm just saying, yes, let's do it. Get me in touch with the e-commerce platform. So I'm just trying to pursue as much as possible. And that's really only made possible by the fact that I don't have a million things on my plate.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
yeah, so that's good. Yeah, the other piece of it is I'm really taking a page out of your playbook where I'm looking at things over the next few months instead of over just the next few days or weeks. And that seems to have a calming effect and a more strategic approach where I say, instead of trying to do everything right now, I say, if this week I get this important thing done and next week I get this next thing done, and if I look at it that way, then a month from now, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, I'll be much further along. Instead of like panicking and feeling guilty and stressed about it now, I'm just saying just knock them down in a nice orderly fashion, keep everything rolling as it is on the client acquisition side, and then build out the marketing system and the funnel and all these different assets. Instead of saying I need to get all them done right now, just be okay with the fact that it can't all be done now. Just do it well and just go piece by piece. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, there's a really good episode of Startups for the Rest of Us this week. Kind of goes along those same lines. I think they were talking all about how to build a marketing calendar, and Rob and Mike were both sharing how they plan out their marketing initiatives like 90 days ahead of time, which is really smart. I need to do actually more of that. I do plan like the overall things that I'm working on, but specifically when it comes to marketing, I've got to be more focused on like, all right, these are the tests that we're going to run in the next 4 weeks, and then we're going to and these are like higher level things that we're going to test over the next 60, 90 days. So that was a really good episode. We'll link it up in the show notes.
Interesting. Yeah, I think the big thing, the way I view the marketing pieces right in these early stages, I see it as assets, as marketing assets. So if I'm working on a task, I'm not working on an asset. So, launching the blog and writing content and setting up an email autoresponder, all these things I see as assets that stay in place and move the business forward to a big extent.
Yeah.
getting one more person launched on their free trial is good, but it can't take priority over the asset. So yeah, and that's part of why I'm starting to see like, okay, I need to delegate more, because if I don't work on the assets, which is what I really should be working on, and the strategy, and I keep working on these tasks, and I'm busy and everything's great, and there's so much momentum, it's not gonna move as fast as it needs to.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it. That working on an asset, because I mean that's exactly what I was writing about in that article on delegation. Is that so many like freelancers or new founders have trouble with delegating, because it's like I could spend 2, 3, 4 times as much time writing out the instructions and training someone on how to do it and doing QA on their work, when it would just take me like 10 minutes and just do it myself. But what you're really doing when you're investing that time in writing the procedure is you're building an asset. You're building a system that's going to run without you, so that you never have to do this task again.
Right. Yeah, and that's the interesting thing. It feels stressful, and I can fall into like the dark cloud of how have I not launched the blog? It's been on my to-do list for 6 months, but the reality is, I spoke with my business partner, co-founder, and we were talking about this, and I said, look, the truth is we should pat ourselves in the back. This is moving from one phase to another. Right. The first phase was, do people care about this product? Does it give them value? Will they pay for it? Will they continue to pay for it? So now we are leaving that, and we are now transitioning to how can we more efficiently gather clients. Yeah. So it's like a painful piece, but it's good. You have to acknowledge, okay, now you're moving from, is this viable, to how do we really, how do we have the ability to step on the gas and it doesn't crash the car into the side of the road? So I see it as a good thing. So I'm trying to stay positive whenever I get into these situations where I look at these important things that I want done and I haven't gotten them done. I'm just saying to myself, look, this is part of the growing pain of moving from no systems and everything manual, and let's just get this launched, to let's build a machine. Let's build something that you can really put X on one side and get 5X on the other side, and then increase the speed.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what we're really going to talk a lot about here today when we get into webinars, because that's certainly one of those things that, for me, that's been on my to-do list that I've been wanting to do for well over a year now, and I still haven't fully dove into it. So we'll get into that in a minute. One quick distinction I wanted to make there was that, like, you mentioned doing sales calls and getting customers on board, and it's very manual, like we spoke about in the previous episode. In the early days, getting customer number 1, customer number 5, number 10, you got to do that. And yes, that's not. It's not the most systemized, and it's not a machine, but you're getting those customers in the door, especially for a SaaS recurring revenue service. Like you are building an asset in that once you get them on board and paying their customers and they're subscribed, and that helps you get that early traction and fund your early days so that you can start devoting more time to building these systems, which is where you're at now. So I think it's important to do that manual, get on the phone and sell some shit, like, and then make that transition, and I think we're both kind of in that phase right now too.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to stop. You have built your automated sales system around the fact that you still need to talk to people on the phone. There's nothing wrong with it. It just means that you won't be the one that does it all the time. The way I see CartHook clients, if I call it an average of $100 a month per client, that's $1,200 a year. You don't need that many of them to have a decent, viable business. If I see spending 1 hour of phone conversations every day, Monday to Friday times 50 weeks for 250 days, if I can do that and pick up 250 clients, 1 a day, at the end of that, you're looking at 250 grand a year from those 250 people. That's worth your time. So
yeah, totally.
Even if you have to talk on the phone for an hour every day, as long as you build the automated systems in place to get you on a phone conversation for an hour a day that closes somebody, cool. It doesn't have to all be automated and hands off and kick your feet up under a palm tree and never talk to a customer. That's nice, but it's not necessary.
Exactly. Like I've been, we have in Restaurant Engine, we have basically systems that outsource that entire lead comes into the website, consultation call is made by my teammate, they follow up and everything, but I'm actually starting to think about ways to even like filter out the most promising leads and escalate those to me so that like I get on the phone to close the ones that are most likely to get on board. Maybe that and that would kind of be like an effort to move them through that funnel faster,
Right. Lead scoring essentially.
Yeah.
All right, cool, man. Well, I am really pumped up for this week's.
Yeah.
Well,
and it was like a crazy train
in action.
So before we dive right into it, once again, we are planning on doing like a question and answer episode. We'll hopefully do a bunch of these, and if you guys have any questions at all about anything that we're talking about, tell us about your business, tell us about what you're working on, and ask for some feedback. You can ask us those questions, and maybe we'll cover them here on the show. So you can go to bootstrappedweb.com/ask. That'll get you to our contact form, and send us a question. We'd like to get into it on the show.
Yeah, definitely. Or tweet us at Jordan Gall and at CastJam.
Mm-hmm.
This week I answered a question on which headphones I use. They're not the most attractive things in the world, but the audio is great and they're cheap.
There you go. Well, see, Twitter's good for something after all. Huh?
Yep. I didn't use an affiliate link or anything, but So I'm excited to get into this week's topic, webinars. This is something I've kind of been, hot on for about a year, and have wanted to do more of it for CardHook. I did my first webinar 2 months ago to sell an online course. Really, really interesting process. It worked. It made money. I know I want to do more of it. When I map out my sales funnel for CardHook, one of those steps is, okay, if this happens and then this happens, and if they don't sign up, or if they do, webinar is firmly one of the most important steps there. And we'll talk about how that can be an asset and can be automated, potentially, all these other things. So let's jump into this week's topic on webinars and how to use them to get sales, grow your business, get customers.
Yeah, totally. And I think we should frame this entire episode like we were talking earlier. Like, you and I are both in the process of getting into webinars. We've both kind of dipped our feet a little bit. I've done one a couple weeks ago. I did one for someone else as well. I can talk about that. But you did one, made some sales right on your very first one. So we're just getting into this, and it's something that I'm building a big plan around for both my upcoming course, but also in Restaurant Engine. You're planning it for CardHook. So we're not basing what we're talking about on like, we're not like the world-renowned webinar experts here, but we're just going to share some of the things that we've picked up along the way and some of the things that we're thinking about.
Right. I think the best thing we can do is act as a sort of filter between, right, you and I are both students of webinars. Right? We're in the learning and implementation phase. We're not total novices, and we're not super experts. So I think what we can do best is talk about the resources that we have used to learn, how we applied them, the tools we use, and what's worked and what hasn't worked, and just kind of be a filter for people listening, and let them get some sense of how we've used them, and they can, depending on their situation, either they're thinking about doing their first webinar or they've used them and get a bit different perspective from how we've done it.
Yeah. So like, what is it about webinars that is so attractive, or why are you diving into it, and why am I diving into it? I'll ask you first.
Okay. So I think the biggest reason I'm diving into it is because they work, and everywhere you look, they work. I remember listening to Lewis Howes's Mixergy interview, which is a phenomenal interview, and he gives a course, and it has worked tremendously for him. I know James Wedmore is a beast on webinars, and I think we'll talk about him a little later on, is a phenomenal resource for information on webinars and how to use them properly and how to structure them. And then the last piece of anecdotal evidence I've gotten is I went through Dane Maxwell's foundation course, right, a few years ago. And one of the most interesting things that he talked about is how he built up not Snap Inspect, Paperless Pipeline, his software. Right now he's selling a course and teaching people how to build their own software companies, but the reason he can do that successfully and with credibility is because he built Paperless Pipeline using webinars as one of his big tactics. And so I was close to him and listening to a lot of his information, and everything he was saying just in my mind said, I can do that. It works because you can gather a large number of people and you can make the perfect pitch to them. And it's not about webinar, it's more about video and audio and the connection that you make with the person and the excitement and energy and momentum you can build on a live event and the scarcity and this pressure. It's amazing. I've been on webinars that I have no interest in buying the product and I still get excited about it. You can't even help it. So it has this strange dynamic, and it's a combination of, it's definitely worked for other people. People have done really well off of it. You look at your own experience, and it excites you on webinars, and I know I've bought things off webinars, and a combination of the promise that it holds. Like if you can get 20, 30, 40, 50 people on a webinar every other week, right? I think for CardHook, if I can get 50 people on a webinar every other week, so 100 people per month, the conversion rates on webinars are just really good.
Yeah, and okay, so here's where I'm coming from on this webinar, on the whole webinar thing. And I think that there are probably a lot of people out there who are like me, again, creative designers, developers. Like, I've never bought anything from a webinar. A webinar never convinced me to buy something. I almost never attended webinars just because I wanted to. The few that I have ever attended, it's because I want to watch to see how they do a webinar.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you might consider like watching an hour-long Mixergy interview, basically, or a Mixergy course, like pretty similar to doing a webinar. But that's a recorded course, whatever. It's a little bit different.
Right, and there isn't an offer at the end.
Right. And so I come from that perspective, like
skeptical. Yeah,
a little skeptical. Like it's never been something that has worked to sell me on anything. I've never really been interested in scheduling, on a Tuesday afternoon to spend an hour of my time sitting on some webinar. So I come from that place. But again, I watch the Lewis Howes stuff. I've seen James Wedmore's stuff. I hear again and again and again, webinars work. And then you start to see numbers and these income reports and these guys are releasing products, and they really make webinars like the centerpiece of their whole strategy. So, right. I mean, it's pretty clear. It obviously works, and at a certain point, you have to accept the fact that, like, even though it doesn't work on me, it can very well work for my customers. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I don't know yet, but
it's worth a try, though. I think
absolutely worth a try.
The evidence shows that it's worth a try, because if you can get it to work, it's something that's scalable, because you can have 50 people on a webinar or 500 people, and it's essentially the same amount of work.
Yeah, and I think so. Like, why is it effective? I think, like you said earlier, just the fact that it's an event that is very effective. There are like automated email autoresponders, and that's something that just kind of rolls out continuously. But a webinar is an event, right? Like, you have to show up, and this thing is happening live, and there's an exclusive offer only available today. I think there's no doubt about there's clearly urgency about that. And yes, you can get into like the automated webinars and all that. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the event aspect is what really makes it interesting. Of course, it's not all about the offer at the end. You really are teaching something for an hour on this webinar. And the few webinars that I have sat in on, especially when I'm just watching them to like spy on how they do a webinar, I'm actually sitting there like, yeah, I kind of learned something there,
And that makes the difference, especially over time.
Yeah.
Just the fact, right, before I joined this podcast with you, before I did any of these interviews, right, sitting happily in anonymity, I did my first webinar just announcing that I was going to do a webinar, created a sense of expertise. And people started asking me questions and approaching me in a different way. Hey, Jordan, would you mind if we talked for 5 minutes? Which is a different dynamic. And then doing the webinar, and this is the real key that I think has to be mentioned. What a webinar does is it offers you the opportunity to provide a large amount of value at once. And when someone does that, you either, if it makes sense for you at the time, right, what a webinar should do is give a lot of value and then have the person watching say, what's next? How do I get more? How do I get this done faster? How do I do this with you? Right? And if you're not ready to buy, what it does is it makes you walk away with a sense of this person being an expert, and then in the future, it makes it much more likely that you'll do business with them and want to do business with them. James Wedmore, perfect example. I've been watching his stuff for a year. I never bought from him. All of a sudden, last month, he sent out this thing that just hit me the right way and the time and the moment, and I joined.
Yeah, yeah. It's listening to someone speak or watching someone present. It has a much greater impact than just reading an article somewhere or even just following someone on Twitter. It's very similar to watching someone speak in person at a conference or at a meetup or something. I've spoken at conferences and meetups, and that has had the same effect. It's like you get people coming up to you afterward, people sending you emails, buying your products. They see you as an authority when you're up there teaching and at the podium sharing something of value to the audience. And it's like the same kind of deal as like podcasts or doing like videos and whatnot. It's a much more intimate relationship than just reading words in an article.
Yes, and it creates an element of celebrity. And when you can combine an element of celebrity with the element of authority, that's hugely powerful. Because, yeah, sometimes I almost look for excuses to do business with people just because I like them, and I'm just drawn to them. Right? We've talked about this before with 37 signals. You kind of like them so much, you almost look for an excuse to use Basecamp.
Yeah.
And I've done that multiple times, and I still don't use Basecamp because I kind of don't like it, but I would still give them a chance.
Right.
And that's what webinars do. They give you the opportunity to give value and help solve someone's problem in such a significant way that they trust you.
So yeah, totally. So I mean, what about the idea that are webinars overused? I mean, you see them everywhere, and way more this year than ever before. And I mean, are they overused? And also, do they come off as like a little bit spammy, right? Maybe this is just me coming from, okay, I'm a tech web geek, and I kind of see through what a webinar really is,
right?
Or what it's intended to be. Not that it doesn't provide real value, because it can and it should. But obviously, it's a sales tool. When I see someone promoting, join my free webinar on Twitter, or I see that floating through LinkedIn or wherever, it's okay. They're trying to sell me something. That's why I don't want to join.
Yes. So I think all of the above. They are a bit overused, and it is a bit of you being like a techie design snob, and they're not as spammy as you perceive them to be, or me or someone else. That does not mean that they don't work and that you shouldn't use them. Perfect example, I saw recently an advertisement for a webinar, and in the advertisement it says there's nothing for sale. Right? So that lowered my guard. And what the webinar did is it offered a free consultation. So you're not making an offer for a sale, which helped me join the webinar, helped me trust you more. But then your offer is for a free consultation to get on the phone, and you're going to try to sell me something there. Right? So this is just being creative and innovative in something that's becoming a bit saturated, but there's still an unlimited amount of innovation with these things. And
yeah, exactly. And you at a certain point, and I'm speaking like to myself here, you got to get over that bias, Yeah. And I think the thing that helps get over that is when you put out a webinar and it's based on a very specific topic that answers questions that are in the mind of your audience, like that for a fact, your audience, you're just providing value, and your little group, your little tribe, even if it's just 10 people, they're going to join you. And that's all you need. You don't need hundreds, you don't need millions, thousands. It's just, I mean, I did one webinar like a month ago as I just began the telling people that I'm doing a product called Productize. And I did that first webinar not in an effort to sell the course or anything. Nobody even knew about the course yet. I just put it out there. I sent it to maybe a list of like only 50 people. I think people who have, I forgot what it was. I think it was like the first 50 people who joined the free email course. Out of, I don't know, how did I do it? I sent it to my whole list, and I had like 50 people register for the webinar.
Right. Okay, so 50 registrants.
Yeah.
And then how many?
Out of 50 registrants, I thought maybe 5 would like show up, if
right.
that. We had like 18 people on the webinar, and they actually stayed throughout the whole thing, through the Q&A. And at the end, I wasn't pitching a product. I just mentioned that I'm doing Productize. Enter your email to join the early access list. And that was a big kind of wake-up call to me. Was that like, look, I'm teaching something valuable. It's almost obvious, but it's like it was about like how to choose the right idea to productize. And
right.
These are people who have expressed interest in productizing, and you
spoke to 18 of them at the same time.
Yeah, it's people who are joining me live in the middle of an afternoon on a weekday, and it's like, wow, this stuff has an impact, And then we had a great Q&A session, and it actually made me really excited to do it again, which I'm going to do in October. So.
Nice. Well, I think that's a good transition to kind of talk about how we use webinars in our business and how we've used them in the past and what we want to do with them in the future. I know for me, I just did that first webinar that I can talk about, and
yeah.
And
so how did that go?
It was really interesting. The learning process was amazing. It's a little trickier than expected, just because the setup of everything is a bit complicated, right? There's the webinar itself, and that you need to structure out. You need to create PowerPoint slides. You need to write a script. At least this is how I did it. But that's almost secondary. First, you need to set things up. So you need to be able to get registrants. You need a landing page. You need to add people to an email list. You need to send out confirmation emails, right? And I had a lot of trouble.
Slides. You need to like create the presentation, right?
Right, but before you even do that, you need to get everything in order.
Yeah.
Right, because the presentation is what happens on the day of the webinar. There's a whole bunch of stuff that happens before that.
But even preparing those, like I did them like the night before my webinar,
Yeah, I spent a lot of time on the slides. And the script. But what I had frustration with was the setup process. So I was using Facebook ads. Though Facebook ads are awesome but frustrating enough on their own. I think that's another topic. But I was running Facebook ads to a landing page. So I'm using lead pages for the landing page, and then I wanted to add people to my email list at the same time as they registered for the webinar. So I'm using Aweber for the email list and using GoToWebinar for the webinar. So first you have to go and create the webinar and the settings and the reminders there at GoToWebinar. And then you have to go over to Aweber, or in the future I'll use GetDrip, and then you need to set up the emails that go along with it. So you want to do that ahead of time. You want to say to yourself, okay, let's go look back at Jeff Walker. Let's go look back at James Wedmore. Let's look back at Derek Halpern. Let's see how these people set up this launch sequence that leads up to a webinar. So this is all the stuff that goes on in the background. Okay, what email is going to go out first? And then how many days before the webinar am I going to send a reminder? Do I want to include a little bit of value like slides or like a handout questionnaire thing before the webinar? And then do I need to remind the day of or the day before? Is GoToWebinar going to send out an automated reminder? So all these different pieces to set up before the webinar actually happens, I think is just as important as actually delivering the webinar itself.
Yeah, I was going to say, and maybe right now, like, since we're already talking about, we could talk about like the tools.
Yeah, you can't avoid. You can't avoid.
But I have a question there, because I didn't use GoToWebinar. I used Webinars on Air, Google Plus. So I'll get into that in a minute. But
right.
You said that you had to set up the email sequences in Aweber. Like, does GoToWebinar not do that automatically?
It does. It sends out this simple, straightforward, standardized template reminder. But I wasn't counting on that on being enough. Gotcha. I wanted to do it the right way. And I think I went about 90% of where I wanted to. At some point, I just got so busy and was spending so much time on this stuff, and I needed to get to the slides that I just didn't do some of the things. Like the day before the webinar, I wanted to send out a handout that said basically, this is your handout, print this out. That gets people more engaged, and you basically have like a fill in the blank. And it's essentially a teaser, but it's just a little bit of value. It's a 2-page, 3-page PDF document that gives them a preview of what they're going to learn, and it has like blanks. So it's like the 3 most important things for your sales funnel are blank, blank, and blank. And that gets people to like watch and write down, and that just helps people stay engaged in what you're saying and listening to you. So I wanted to send that out like 2 days before. I didn't get to that. I will next time, but right.
That's a good little tip there. I'll have to do that on the next one. I heard Brennan Dunn talking about how he does a day or 2 before the webinar. He'll send an email asking questions, like submit your questions, and I'll cover them in the Q&A.
Right. You can do a lot of these different things, and you can learn them all from watching the guys that are good at it. What's his name? Entrepreneur on Fire? What's his name? The freaking 280 grand a month man.
What's his name? John Lee Dumas.
Okay, so he's a beast. So why fuck around? Just sign up for his list and see how he does it.
Yeah.
And they do it right. So you get the confirmation, you get pumped up, you get a bunch of value in that email, then you get the reminder, then you get more value, then you get something exciting, and then some like scarcity bit, and then, oh my God, there's so much excitement to make sure you get there on time. We only have 100 slots available because of GoToWebinar's limitations, and it's definitely going to sell out. So all these things that you do to maximize the number of people that show up on the webinar. And then there's a whole bunch of things that happen after the webinar. Like I recorded it, and then I sent out the recording to everyone. Right, because if you took your list of 50 people that registered, 18 showed up. That doesn't mean the 32 aren't interested. It means they didn't show up. So why lose out on that? You need to send them a recording.
Yeah, I don't remember if I did send them a recording. I think I did. But again, like that webinar that I did was like a test run just to see if I could do it without anything breaking, which it went pretty smooth. So okay, so like your setup, what you used was lead pages for the landing page.
Yep.
Aweber to send out emails and pre-emails, even though you didn't do the one, and then GoToWebinar to run the webinar. And slides you use like PowerPoint, and you basically just showed your screen.
Yes, and I recorded everything, and then sent out the recording.
And you recorded. Does GoToWebinar record it, or do you have to record it yourself?
No, GoToWebinar records it automatically. I think once you start, you can have the option to record, but you record, and then then I uploaded that to Vimeo. And then I used lead pages to create a very simple video landing page for the replay. So the replay had its own home. So when I sent out the email to everybody of, hey, excuse me, in case you missed it, here's the replay. So that is on a nice lead pages landing page with a little button below that they can buy the course directly from. So
you use like lead pages for all these creating these pages. You're not using WordPress or anything.
Nope. You could use lead pages for the whole deal.
Right.
The only thing I did.
Why did you upload to Vimeo, not YouTube?
I think I wanted more control. I wanted more control over it.
Control, like the way it's presented, or?
First, I think Vimeo looks more professional. Second, I didn't want it to be public. Yeah, I don't see that piece of it as that big of a deal. I do think using GoToWebinar is the right way to do it. I think it does look more professional, and it's very, very stable. And it's kind of annoying to like ask someone to download and then launch in this weird way. But I also think that process, for some reason, I don't know. It's like what people are used to. It's what people think of as like a professional webinar.
I don't know. So let me tell you what I did.
Right.
I went with Webinars on Air, which is basically like a wrapper wrapped around Google Plus Hangouts on Air.
Right.
I was actually surprised by how simple that whole process was, both for me and for the people who attended.
That's shocking.
It is shocking. Like as frustrating as Google Plus is when we just have calls, like our weekly mastermind call always gets botched. Who knows what's happening with Google Plus? But for a webinar on air, and the service webinarsonair.com, I don't know, it's like $30-40 a month or something like that. Mm-hmm. It worked really well. Basically, at the time of the webinar, it sends the email, or maybe like the day before, whenever. It says, here's the email, click here to join the webinar. User clicks there, takes them to a website, webinar is there playing. They don't have to log into Google+, they don't have to have a Google+ account, they don't have to download anything. They just go there and it's there. And I wasn't even sure about that. I thought that they had to have like a Google+ account, but they don't. They could just watch it. It's like live.
Nice. I mean, that's how it should be.
Yeah. So I thought that was kind of cool because every time I attended a webinar using GoToWebinar, it's like, oh, I got to download something. It's taking forever. And then I found on my computer I had like 10 different GoToWebinar installations. And it's like, you know, but
I hear you. I hope and would love for things to move that way. I think for me, I don't know if I'm being old school or what, but for me, the professionalism and expectations of GoToWebinar is just what I want to stick with.
Well, it's expectations from people who go to webinars a lot, right? So I'm planning on doing it with restaurant owners who I'm guessing a lot of them have never gone to a webinar before.
Right. It should just be a link, and then you see the screen.
Yeah, and that's what
it should be.
That's what I like about Google+. So I think I'll probably try that again until it stops working. So that was my setup. Was I used Webinars on Air, created the thing in Google+, which, as we know, the Google+ Hangout on Air automatically turns it into a YouTube video right when you're done. You can even set that to like unlisted or even like password protected if you wanted to.
Right.
So Webinars on Air automatically sends out like the reminder emails, and they give you like a little embed script that you can pop into a website, and that's like the registration form.
Okay.
I dropped that into my WordPress site, which I guess you could just do that on like any WordPress site. I put it right into the template, customized a little bit, you know.
So it sounds like the end result is similar, but you didn't do as much of the setup and the warming up emails ahead of time. And
I didn't. I mean, again, this is really like I treated it like a test run. I mean, the next one I will do much more of that.
Right.
I really just wanted to see if I could run a technical webinar.
Right.
But yeah, like next time I really want to do like a couple of emails leading up to it, like submit some questions. Maybe here's a worksheet. I really like that idea.
And the emails afterward, and then the
afterward,
sale.
Yeah, and it would be like teaching something and then doing an offer. It was a little bit weird with, I forgot how I did it. I mean, I created slides in, I think, what's it called? A Keynote.
Keynote.
And then I had to like share my screen. But Webinars on Air was a little bit weird with that. Like you could still see like the scroll bar in my computer and everything, which is a little bit odd. But I don't know. I sized it up so it wasn't so bad.
Right.
But other than that, and then Webinars on Air makes it really easy for people to submit questions, and then I can like turn on questions, turn off questions, and they also have like show an offer, so you can like program in like special offer with a button and the button text and the link that it should go to, and like turn it on when you want it on, turn it off. You can even like redirect people to a page when the webinar is over.
Nice. So it's
I didn't really take advantage of all that. I did use the offer just to point them to the early access page.
Nice.
And
it sounds to me like the ecosystem for Hangouts on Air is building itself up to make it much more viable. Because I think for me, in my head, what I wouldn't do and wouldn't recommend is just a Hangout on Air and then expect to do everything else yourself. So this Webinars on Air, right, this product, this skin, looks like it adds a lot of value and a lot of the pieces that a GoToWebinar or whatever other type of software does for you if you're trying to use a webinar to market and to sell. So
yeah, exactly. I think you're right. I think it adds the exact functionality that you need and strips away the other crap that complicates it, like having to log into Google. People don't need to do that. I don't know how it would perform with like 100 people or more on the webinar. I had 18, so
right. You expect it to be the same,
but I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's also part of why I went with GoToWebinar, because I didn't want to worry about the technical side. Right? It's such a big event, and I spent money. I spent like $1,200 in ad spend on Facebook. there's just a lot of pressure because it's an event. You just don't want to screw it up. You just don't want something to go wrong, and it's a sweaty, stressful affair, especially your first one. So you just don't want to add anything to it. I mean, I remember it was a stressful day. I did it in the co-working space in Miami, and I wanted to go to the conference room, and that didn't work, so I had to just do it like in front of the whole co-working space. I just looked out, and I was like, guys, I am going to be talking some weird sales funnel shit for like 90 minutes, and I'm sorry, but this is really important. And they were like, it's cool, man.
So you really were presenting like in front of people live, like in a way, you know?
I was looking at a computer screen, talking, hoping that everything was working and everyone could hear me, and at the same time had like 15 people in the co-working space like working and hearing me do this whole thing at the same time. So I had to just like tune that out and focus on the screen and focus on my script.
You know, that brings up an interesting point, because I was going into this first webinar that I did, I was a little bit nervous, or I expected that I would be a little bit nervous when I'm up there talking in front of people. And I always get nervous when I do public speaking events, right? I've done a few more of them, so I've become a little bit more comfortable, and I've learned some tricks to like battle through that a little bit, but you still always get butterflies when you're talking to a group of people, and I get them really bad. And I was surprised at doing the webinar how comfortable I was even with 18 people, because if I'm speaking to a room of 18 people, that's not a huge amount, but I'm still pretty nervous.
Yeah, stressful.
Seeing all their faces and everything. But I'm sitting in the comfort of my office, doors closed, not in a co-working space, so it's like it's just me and a microphone, right? I was just hanging out, just talking. You know?
That's ideal. I think a lot of that is due to the fact that you do this podcast and you're comfortable with where you are right now, literally and physically where you are. You're comfortable talking on the mic and being on screen and all that. So I think that's good, right? It's one of these things where you expect the first one's going to be rough, and then the second one's a little better, and the third one's better, and then you just slowly get better until it becomes natural, just like like any other task that you kind of dread at first.
Exactly.
So I just wanted to go through, because as I heard myself speak, I was being a bit flitty. I was being, I did this and I did that, and if I were listening to this, I would just want to be like, Jordan, just freaking say how you did it, piece by piece. So I just want to go through it once, and then I want to get into like how you want to use webinars for Restaurant Engine, and then we'll talk about how I want to do it for CardHook and kind of get deeper into the actual strategy.
Okay.
So just real quick, Facebook ad to a landing page by lead pages that's connected to Aweber and GoToWebinar at the same time. GoToWebinar sends out the confirmation and the reminder, and obviously the actual link to the webinar. Aweber adds them to an email marketing list for this webinar and for future purposes, sends them the automated sequence that you want to use before and after the webinar with the reminders, any of the value you want to add, and then the follow-up that includes the recording, and then the reminder for purchase, and then the reminder that the cart is closing and they're about to lose their chance, and then the final sales pitch. And then after that, I kept it going with like a thank you. So that's how it worked. That was the setup outside of the actual event.
Yeah, and I guess this is a good point to touch on right here is how do you track the funnel? And this is one of the reasons why I'm so excited about doing webinars. It's because you can track the funnel and really nail down how much it costs to acquire a paying customer in the end. So what are the steps that you're tracking? You have ad spend, and like how many people are viewing the ad, how many people are then clicking the ad, then how many people convert to registered for the webinar, just registered.
Mm-hmm.
And then out of those registrations, you're measuring how many people show up, right?
Right.
That'll always be a smaller percentage of the people who actually register.
Yeah, it's somewhere between 30 and 40%. Yeah, the way I looked at it was spend to get people to click on the ad. The ad gets them to the landing page. The landing page converts somewhere between 15 and 25%. And then of those 30 to 40% actually show up, you try to maximize it by sending out the recording, and then you make your pitch. The people who on the webinar are most likely to buy, but you definitely should not forget about the people who didn't show up.
Right, so everybody who registered still gets the recording.
Yeah, definitely. So it gets the recording and then it gets the offer and the last minute and the, it's about to close and the whole sales sequence.
Yeah, and then so basically at the end of the day, what you're measuring is how many people bought, and then you kind of run that number against the cost per
Exactly right.
attendee, or like how much it costs to make a sale.
Yeah, well, what I used on
You run it
Facebook,
back up through the funnel.
Facebook ads, you can optimize for different things. So you can optimize for clicks, for impressions, or for conversions. So if you set things up on your landing page with Facebook ads to maximize or to optimize for conversions, then all you're looking at, and this is what I always would prefer to look at, is how much money are you spending per conversion, per registrant, right? That's what Facebook ad is going to convert. When they convert, that means they registered on your landing page.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I had it somewhere about $8, $6 to $8 per conversion. So I spent $6 to $8 to get a registrant, and then 40% of those showed up. So now, right, do the math there. You're basically paying about $20, little less, $18 per person to show up on your webinar. And then you can say to yourself, okay, how easy is it to sell my product? Is it a digital product? Is it software? Is it a service? What's the average price? So my math was $400 per student for the course, and I got 5 students, so I made $2,000 in revenue from spending about $1,200 in ad spend. Not amazing, but not a bad start, right? It was my first one. It wasn't optimized. I didn't have all the pieces in place. But then if you look at that and you say, okay, if you're selling a digital product, if you're selling something that can be sold easily over and over, that's not bad.
No, not bad at all.
If I can spend $1,000 every day to make $2,000 in revenue, I would be very, very happy.
Exactly. And again, folks, this is Jordan Gal, who at the time of you doing this was before you started doing the podcast, before you started blogging.
Total anonymity.
Total, you had no name recognition, but just offering something of value to a targeted audience that you targeted through Facebook ads.
Right, and
the
course.
Possible,
Yeah, the course was on how to build. All right, so now let's get into what's inside the webinar, right?
Yeah.
What are
some of the tricks and like techniques that you've picked up along the way, or that I picked up?
Okay, by far the absolute best resources, the 2 best resources, in my opinion, are Lewis Howes and James Wedmore. Lewis Howes does a great job of communicating and articulating what needs to get done. James Wedmore, and I link this in the notes. There's a web page called realmarketinginsider.com. That's his membership program /VSA VIP. realmarketinginsider.com/VSA VIP. I linked it. It's like this weird, impossible to find link I somehow found, and on it he has like a 2-hour webinar.
You sent me that. I watched it. The free webinar it's really valuable. I watched the whole thing, and
that's
so much,
it. That's what it is. If you can deliver enough value, then you convince people without even selling. So my webinar was on how to build a sales funnel. So I went step by step. I said, first, you need to know who your customer is. So you need to create a customer avatar. Then you need to map out the end result that they're looking for. What are they trying to achieve when they do business with you? Then you need to map out 3, 4, 5, 6 steps that will take them from where they are currently to where that end result is. Then for each of those steps, each of those is going to turn into an email in your email autoresponder, in your sales funnel. And then once you do that, you need to outline it, and then you need to use a narrative device to make it interesting, and then you need to put that together, and here are the tools to do it. And I just gave as much value as I possibly could, and I think the smart way to put it that I heard is you teach what, and then you sell how. So you teach what you need to do. You need to figure out who your customer avatar is. You need to figure out what their end result is. You need to do this. This is what you need to do. Mm-hmm. And then if you are ready to go the next step, you can go figure this out on your own. I hope you got as much out of this as possible, and I thank you so much for spending an hour with me. But if you want to go the next level and get this done, my course will show you how to do it all.
Right, the step-by-step, the templates, the walking you through how to do it all.
Exactly.
one of the things that I picked up from Lewis Howes was you have to make it really engaging and interactive. And like every 10 or 15 minutes of the webinar, maybe even quicker than that, you have to do some kind of thing where we're like, okay, I'm going to do a survey. You guys tell me, tell me what you think about this question, or
Right. This next point is really, really important, so this is what you want to
write this down, or like do something, to keep. It shouldn't just be like kind of monotone, just talking, going through the slides, one by one. You've got to do something to like wake them up every 5-10 minutes.
Right. And everyone. Right, everyone says at the beginning, you say, shut everything down, focus. This is how you're going to get the most out of it. I really think very, very few people turn everything off and stare at the screen with just your webinar on with 100% attention.
No, of course not.
Right. So here's the thing, though. Lewis is a master at that stuff, and I think he is because he is advanced. So he has all the fundamentals down, and now he's playing on the margins. He's fiddling with the things that maximize the conversions and maximize engagement. And these little tricks are from a pro. I went about it as a novice, and so instead of focusing on like getting those right, I just said, let me just focus on just giving value and hope that's enough. And in the future, I'll nail everything perfectly about this is where you need to pay attention and write this down, and here's the worksheet and all the other stuff that you should be doing, but it's a lot to do all at once.
Yeah, totally.
I think the biggest focus just needs to be on, if you're going to discuss a problem, you want to get people really far along in the solution in your webinar, and that's how they trust you without you having to sell anything.
Yeah, and then how do you make that transition to the offer at the end? Right.
Okay.
Like what are some tricks to smooth that transition, and what are some selling techniques? After you spend 45 to an hour teaching.
Right, and even the teaching can be broken down nicely. Right, there's a little handout I've seen before. Right, the 7 steps. Like the first piece is the meet and greet, and that you just want to be human. Right, so my first slide in my webinar was like a picture of me saying, "We'll get started in a minute." And then I'm talking about, hey, how's everyone going? Sorry to put the picture of the Miami summer and rub it in everyone's faces. I'm just being normal and engaging.
And you can also talk about something current to prove that this is not recorded, right?
Right, that it's live.
Yeah. Some kind of current event.
So that's but that's before it even starts. So if the webinar starts at 10 a.m., you want to get on at 9:50 and start chatting like that. Then the welcome, you just want to tell people what's about to happen, right? Who are you? What's going to happen on this call? Why is it going to be really valuable? And then after that, it's a little bit of a story where you can build some credibility, right? So for me, it was, why am I teaching and selling a course on building a sales funnel? Because this is what I do for my consulting clients, and it was really hard to figure out how to write content in autoresponders for other people's businesses. And so after having figured that out, I really think it's valuable to other people also. You tell a little bit about your story, and then the meat of it is, okay, this is how you do it. This is what you do, and then you do this, and then you do this, and then you do that, and then you give something actionable. Yeah. And then after that, that's when you make the transition.
Yeah, and that transition, this was I kind of had the wrong impression for a long time about webinars. I thought that the whole idea for a while was like, just promote the free webinar, the teaching and whatnot, and then the selling at the end, you should do that, but you don't have to talk about that until you get there. Like, it should be a surprise that you're selling something at the end. But no, like, you should be totally upfront that before the webinar even starts, even in the emails, in the intro, introduce yourself. I teach a premium course in this. Or stay tuned to the end. I'm going to tell you about something. Like, you don't have to make that the focus up front. Obviously, the focus is what you're teaching, the topic. But mention it. I mean, all the webinars that I've been watching lately to see how they do it is they are totally upfront about the fact that at the end of this webinar, I'm going to make you a special offer.
Yeah,
so just be upfront about it.
Right. I think that's better off. And I think I just said a line or two about it. But I didn't focus on it because I didn't really know how to introduce it, and yeah, it's a bit of a tricky thing. But I think you're still better off mentioning it and talking about it up front, because why not? Yeah, but that transition after you teach, right? The ideal is to then introduce a new problem, and then your offering, your course, your paid product is the solution to it. So the way I did it was, okay, now you know how to build a sales funnel and how to go about it, and you have all the steps, and I'll send this recording to you, and you'll have it as a resource and everything else. But if it sounds overwhelming, you still need to get all this done. So, and then I listed out what still needs to get done. You need to figure out what tools to use. You need to integrate it on your website. You need to, do all these steps. And if that sounds like a lot for you, that's why I created the Sales Funnel Roadmap, which will do this for you. And it's a 4-week course that has 4 modules. And in week 1, we're going to get this done. In week 2, we're going to get this. Week 3, week 4, so that by the end of it, this is what you'll have. Basically selling the dream of, this is your current problem, you want to build a sales funnel. By the end of the 4 weeks after you have bought this, you will have a sales funnel, and that will give you these results that come out of having a sales funnel. Right. And then this is the price, and this is how you sign up, and thank you so much. Now let's jump into the Q&A.
And of course you can include, like, if you have them, like case studies, success stories, testimonials.
That's the idea.
All this stuff can be included in that 15 minute pitch section of the webinar.
That's the ideal, and I think that works tremendously well. I didn't have any of that, so all I talked about was some clients and what they've said about me, but it would be much more effective to show previous clients, previous students, previous results. Yeah, and then the Q&A session, which was awesome for just talking to people, and awesome to hear what you left out.
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
Totally.
All these questions are the gaps that you left out.
Yeah, exactly. Last week I was sitting in on David Simon Garland's webinar. He was selling a webinar about how to create online courses. That's his product.
Right.
I had no intention of buying the course, or anything. I just wanted to see how he ran one of these webinars, right? So an interesting thing popped up when I stayed till the end to see how he delivers his offer and how he makes that transition, and I thought it was really interesting. And this is another reason why I think webinars can be very effective if you do it this way. I'm not sure if I would do it the same way, but what he did was he transitioned into the offer, and then he started talking about the product. He started talking about the testimonials and the case and the success stories that people have had. And he's spending like 10 minutes into all this stuff, and he still has not provided the link to buy yet.
Mm-hmm.
He's forcing you to sit through the entire pitch before you even have the chance to go buy. And I think
the price,
right? And he's anchoring it too. Once he gets close to the price, he's anchoring. He's like, people told me I should charge $5,000 for this. Others have said $2,000 for this. And,
right. So a pro.
Right. And because what most people would probably do is once you get into that section, you'd like post the link, and like while you're talking, you can start taking in sales. But I guess the reason why it's effective is you're overcoming all of the objections before anyone has a chance to abandon.
Right. It's the perfect sales pitch. You get to price anchor. You get to discuss the objections before the decision can be made, before the price is revealed. Yeah. Right. It's the same reason the sideways sales letter, right? This is Jeff Walker's thing. It's the same reason it works, because you build in so much value and you meet these objections and price anchor, and all that comes before the offer. So you're just perfectly positioned. Yeah, I see the video launch sequence and the webinar thing as very closely related.
Yeah,
because what you're doing is giving value and selling first before the decision can be made.
Yeah, like the interesting and the question that I'm still trying to battle with myself right now is I see a lot of these products, they're never available for anyone to just go on the website and buy. Like you can only buy it if you go to the webinar, or you can only buy it if you make it through an entire email video sequence, right? Like,
I mean, there's got to be a reason for it.
Right. I guess the question is, as a new product creator, are you losing out on sales by forcing people to go through all those hoops? But But at the same time, you see like the pros are, or the people who are really successful at this. That's what they do. They only open it up to people who've made it through the webinar. I wonder, like, is that? I guess the math works out, and I'm trying to figure out, like, is it?
What do you have to lose? I think that's the reason you see people like David Simon Garland and John Lee Dumas. They do a webinar every week or every other week. So yes, you can't buy unless. I think one of them. I think John Lee Dumas. I think you can just go and buy on the site. But a lot of these products you can't buy unless you go through the funnel or through the launch.
Sure. I think I looked at his. I don't really follow his stuff too much, but I think last time I looked at it,
Podcaster's Paradise.
Yeah, I think like the call to action is like join this week's webinar.
I think you can get there, and look, the truth is, people who really want to buy it, they'll find a way to buy it. Yeah, but I think there's a lot of reason to it. It's the same thing as having a really long sales page. That stopped working because people went to the bottom and they looked at the price and made a decision before they got any of the value and heard any of the testimonials. So it's just an admission of I will have a much more successful, higher conversion rate if I force people to allow me to deliver them value before I make them the offer.
Right. Very cool. Well, man, we covered a lot in this.
I know.
Is there anything else to touch on when it comes to webinars?
I want to hear how you plan on using it in Restaurant Engine.
Yeah. So, and I haven't fully thought all this out yet. It's on my to-do list next month to really dig into this for Restaurant Engine. But yeah, I want to implement it because I see it as a more measurable way to approach the sales funnel, because up until now we've been almost entirely relying on organic content, which has taken us to a certain point, but now, like you said early on, I want to make it more into a machine that I know that if we dump this amount of leads into the top of the funnel, it will result in this many new customers consistently. And I see webinars as a potential solution to doing that. I'll probably start with, and I'm going to do this on Hotel Propeller too. I might even start with that before Restaurant Engine. I'll start with like one per month, and maybe then increase it to like once every 2 weeks.
And what's it going to be focused on? Just what the importance of a website for a restaurant, or trend, or I guess you can take on different topics and see which ones people find more interesting.
I tend to think that it should be, for this type of product, in my personal situation here, signing up for Restaurant Engine or Hotel Propeller, you're making the decision to redesign your website. So you have to already be in that mindset, like, I'm looking for a web designer, we need a new website. I already know that. So
right, much further along in the decision process.
Yeah, it can't just be like, how a quick 5 tips for your Facebook page that you can implement if you want. So I think the topic should be around 5 things to think about when you're redesigning your website, or
right, to capture the same type of person.
Or that's a bad title, but it'd be something like how to get more customers to your restaurant using the web, or something along those lines, right? And so I think it should be really tied to our product, but teaching high level strategy, things that we actually implement on your website, like responsive and mobile, and then just get into the pitch for how. And I mean, the other thing that I want to use webinars for, I don't know if these would be the same educational webinars, or if I should break these out into their own separate type of webinar, is we spend a lot of time on these consultation calls just answering the same questions over and over and over again. Maybe if we have like a Restaurant Engine tour webinar, the whole webinar is just about how Restaurant Engine works, and that way, because like currently we get people requesting consultations, and we kind of treat them one by one, and we do have a video tour, and a lot of people learn things there, but they still want to talk to us. I'm thinking maybe this can become something where we can process 5, 10, 20 leads at a time instead of one at a time.
Interesting.
So once they sign up, all those questions in a group.
Once they sign up, it's this week's Restaurant Engine basically onboarding webinar where people
Yeah,
get to be taken through
either
a tour and then ask questions.
yeah, probably pre-sign up though. Like still in an effort to get them to sign up, but they're already interested in redoing their website. They're interested in Restaurant Engine. They just need to get all of their questions answered.
I see.
You know.
Yeah, that's I like that. It's interesting. Right? It's a yeah. You don't usually hear it in that context, but it makes sense if people have these detailed questions before they sign up. If you can leverage something to answer those questions for a lot of people once, yeah, that sounds good.
The
And
thing,
the more they see you, the more they hear from you, that's better.
yeah, and like the things that I'm thinking through, like I'm not sure. I think it would really. My hunch is it'll be very effective for Hotel Propeller. I'm not sure about Restaurant Engine. I don't know if webinars are something that restaurant owners would respond to because
They don't sit still for an hour in front of the computer.
yeah, like most of them are so busy. We just have a tough time getting on the phone with them when it's like not their busy lunch or dinner hour. Whereas a B&B owner is basically sitting around all day.
Interesting. Yeah, that's smart to think through that in their situation. Yeah, and I agree with you. I think it sounds like Hotel Propeller would be a better fit for it. Yeah, my struggle with how to use webinars for CartHook is it's actually similar to Restaurant Engine. CartHook, I don't try to convince people that they should be doing abandoned cart. Right? I try to take on the people who already know they want it and are looking for the right tool, and I want to be positioned as the right tool for it with better pricing structure and all that. So I'm not sure. I don't want to do webinars about how to recover abandoned carts. That doesn't sound right to me. So I think I'll take the same approach that I did. I just built a sales funnel, an autoresponder, a lead magnet, everything for CartHook while doing the course. And when I thought through that, I really thought about the end result there being a more optimized e-commerce store. And the emails teach how to optimize your e-commerce store. So I really think, yeah, and it almost lends itself perfectly to let me just teach the shit out of optimization and give as much value as I can, completely unrelated to the product, because then at the end, it's a very honest transition to say, now that you know how to better optimize your site, it doesn't matter how optimized, it doesn't matter how perfect you do this, you're still going to have abandonment, and for that, use CartHook.
Right.
It's almost like I don't need to sell the product at all. I just need to talk about their problem and give them value, and then almost sit back and hope that my expertise and trust and authority and the value that I've given, lends them to say, you know what, that's actually an interesting idea. I haven't thought of it, or I've heard of it, but I've never tried it, and let me give it a try with this guy because he actually knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, I think in your case with CartHook, it's such a simple concept of what it does. It just does one thing and it does it really well. And the other thing, earlier you said a webinar is you want to teach what, and then you want to sell how. CartHook, or a tool that prevents abandoned cart, it's not the kind of thing that you can go and do yourself if you wanted to. You still need a software tool to do it. So, and CartHook is that tool. So. Right.
It's almost like the info product lends itself to the what, how situation. The software piece is you can just focus on their issue. Right. If you have like a project management software, if you just help people on how to get clients, right? We know Brendan does this really well. Then you don't have to sell your software at all. Yeah. You can just give them enough value and enough trust, and then say, and I'm the same guy that uses this software, offers this software that does the rest for you, the next piece, the next step in the process. Yeah, I'm really interested to see over the next let's say month or two what the two of us can do on webinars and to kind of report back here on our results. If they're too good, if they're too good or they're too bad, we won't talk about it. If they're mediocre, we'll reveal them.
Exactly, just like everything else on this show.
Yep.
Very cool. Well, let's wrap it there. And this was a really good talk. I think I even have way more to think about now with webinars. So good stuff.
We'll collaborate and we'll look over each other's shoulders and see what works for each other. And That's it. If you guys want to, ask anything about webinars or talk about it, get in touch. And if you want to dig into the backlog of episodes, we're racking them up here, baby. Week by week. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it just goes by.
I know.
So go check them out over at bootstrapweb.com. Subscribe on iTunes. Listen on Stitcher. Anything else you can come up with that I'm not aware of. But if you do like it, head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review. We would really appreciate it.
Yes, indeed. All right.
Excellent.
So we'll see you guys next week.
Good talk.
All right, later.